topic here next. Fine, let's record it, no problem. Let me get rid of the little note there. Let me ask you first, just top of mind, feel free, because I like to do kind of as much of a two-way teaching as possible, kind of more of an engagement if possible. What comes to mind when you hear the word Alzheimer's? Just toss them out if you would. What comes to mind when you hear Alzheimer's? What words? Lost, okay. Mm-hmm. What else? Anything else?
Aging, brain.
Painting, okay. Okay, we can explore that a little bit further too. Okay. Anything else?
Dementia.
Okay, and we're going to explore the difference in terms too, but I'm glad you mentioned that. I think that is probably one of the most common questions that we get at the association. Well, what is the difference between Alzheimer's and dementia? So we will cover that. Any other thoughts before we start?
No treatment yet.
That would be pretty accurate. Yes, thank you. There is something new out there, but it's really, really new and we don't know a whole lot about it yet. For more information, if you're interested in learning more, we do have a program that's scheduled a few times this fall that you can listen in to hear more about a new drug for primarily early stage Alzheimer's patients, and it's called aducanumab or Aduhelm. So, but talking further about the learning objectives over the next maybe 25 minutes max, I'm going to try to make sure there's some time for question and answer. So we'll be comparing Alzheimer's and dementia, as I said, the terminology. We'll be talking about too, how Alzheimer's disease affects the brain. Also the risk factors of the disease itself, what we know about them today. There are actually 3 stages of the disease too that are very, very important, particularly for caregivers, I think, and to know about. And we certainly do a lot of education and support for caregivers, but also too, I just want to mention that we are so grateful that you as young people have an interest and are here to listen and tune in. And Devin, I want to thank you again too. I meant to say earlier for bringing a group of individuals to our Walk to End Alzheimer's on Saturday in Irvine. That was great. So appreciate that. So it's so often considered a disease that only affects old people. And while age is certainly the greatest risk factor, I just gave you an answer to one of the questions I'm going to ask you here shortly. It does affect young people too in a variety of ways, if not caring for parents or concerns about parents, maybe grandparents, neighbors. It affects all of us ultimately. Last couple points here. We'll also recognize some current FDA-approved treatments that can address some of the symptoms of the disease. We'll take a quick look at how scientists are working to advance research. We are in an era of greater hope, and so that is some good news, right? And then we'll close with, I'll just give you a brief introduction to some of the resources that are available through us at the Alzheimer's Association. Before we dig in, and by the way too, feel free to ask questions at any time. I think we're a small enough group, we can do that. I would say too, if you want to put them in the chat box, that would be absolutely fine. I will probably see them as they come through. Devin, I may need to ask for your help with maybe reading those near the end if there are any questions. But we're going to take thanks so much. We're going to take a look first at the impact of Alzheimer's disease. And you will notice that it is pretty staggering. But before we give you any information, I'm going to start here by testing your knowledge, right? Make sure you're on your toes at 4:30 in the afternoon. So let's see what our couple of questions here entail. The first one is, and this is just, you can just guess if you don't know, okay? How many Americans would you estimate are currently living with Alzheimer's disease? There are 4 choices there: 850,000, 5.8 million, 12 million, 3.4 million. Feel free to type the answer in the chat box if you'd like, call out. Anybody say 850,000? 5.8?
I was thinking 5.8.
Okay, 12 million or 3.4 million. Devin, you are right. It's actually, and I'll show you, it's actually now more than 6 million. This is how quickly these numbers change, and not for the better, I'm sorry to say, but these facts and figures in this particular program are 2020. We are in the process of updating them, but I will show you our latest facts and figures for 2021, and the statistics now say 6 million plus, okay? So we currently, how many Americans are currently living with Alzheimer's? Again, we'll say that is 6 million plus. By 2050, this number, believe it or not, is projected to rise to nearly 14 million, which is also equally hard to believe. The next question that I'm going to pose to you involves not those with the disease, but those caring for those with the disease. And please note that this question says, how many unpaid Alzheimer's caregivers are there in the United States? Unpaid. So we are not talking about people who do this for a living. We're talking about family members, friends, etc. 1.2 million, 8.5 million, 13 million, 16.2 million. And I often say, if the last slide didn't tell us already, guess high, right? How many would you estimate? 16.2 million plus, I would say again, plus. Believe it or not, more than 16 million Americans provide unpaid care for people with Alzheimer's or other dementias. That is actually quite staggering, and also I think gives us a window into the ripple effects of the disease, which are tremendous. We have maybe you have parents or aunts and uncles, friends who are already staying home to provide care for someone in the family. Very, very common. It also is not very uncommon that individuals are having to stop working altogether and sometimes risk losing jobs. This has been a huge factor, very difficult factor during COVID, in fact, has really added some other difficult points to this whole issue for sure. Let me go ahead and play this quick video with some additional facts for you. Comments after seeing some of those statistics? Any of them seem surprising to you?
Yeah, I had no idea it was prostate and breast cancer combined.
That's probably the one, Devin, I think that stood the most, tends to stand out the most for me too. I think it's just mind-boggling actually. So again, to keep this kind of on a quick pace, let's go ahead and take a look at, kind of examine the terms Alzheimer's and dementia. We're going to take a look at that category next. But first, another quick little test of your knowledge to make sure we're on our toes. So this is you got a 50-50 chance, right? True or false? Is Alzheimer's a normal part of the aging process? Well, is that true or false? Anybody say true? That would be false. It is not a normal part of aging. It is specifically a brain disease. It causes problems not just with memory, but also with thinking and also the individual's behavior. And that behavior issue comes into play more when we think about the middle stage of the 3 stages in the disease. We'll get to that in a moment. But again, I want to stress, it is not a normal part of aging, Alzheimer's, okay? And I think we've got, yes, one other quick one, and this one might surprise you as well. True or false again, people younger than age 65 can get Alzheimer's. What would you say? I will wait. True or false?
True.
I would say false.
Okay, well, let's see. Is it false?
Like premature?
It's actually true. It's actually
Okay.
true. That's okay. Thank you for guessing here. We're all here to learn, right? Myself included. I continue to learn lots about these topics. Approximately 200,000 Americans under age 65 are living with what's called younger onset. It used to be referred to as early onset, but today we tend to hear younger onset more. In some cases, it is possible for people to develop the disease in their 40s or 50s. I do know someone currently who is, I think, in his late 50s, who is probably progressing into middle stage Alzheimer's at a very young age. I do like to add this too. We'll discuss it again in a moment in a little more detail. But that particular form of Alzheimer's, the younger onset, is by far less common than at what we would consider an older onset. So please keep that in mind too. Everything's important to learn and certainly comprehend within a perspective, right? So very, very important. We're going to hear from an expert here as to some of the differences in terminology. Heather Schneider.
Dementia is the umbrella term for an individual's changes in memory, thinking, or reasoning. There are many possible causes of dementia, and Alzheimer's is the most common cause. Other causes of dementia are vascular dementia, which is marked by changes in the blood flow and the blood vessels in the brain. Dementia with Lewy bodies, identified by specific brain changes throughout the brain that include the buildup of a protein known as alpha-synuclein. And frontal temporal dementia, which is marked by brain cell loss in the front sections of the brain or the frontal lobe. Each type of dementia may have distinct characteristics to cause specific behaviors in the individual. But there is also some overlap in behaviors among the types of dementia.
That's a great visual. I always wish they'd leave that up a little bit longer. But really, again, think of that visual. Dementia is really the overarching general term for a collection of symptoms. Alzheimer's is by far and away the most common form or type or cause, you can use any of those words, of dementia, okay? My mother, I lost my mother to vascular dementia some years ago now. And so vascular dementia, by contrast, is not a brain disease like Alzheimer's. It is caused by restricted or limited blood flow to the brain. Sometimes strokes are the cause. And that limited blood flow to the brain thereby damages. But the onset of the disease and the progression have a good amount of similarities there. I won't take time to go into this glossary of dementias, but I think it's interesting. I'll at least let it give you a list here so you can see. And this is only a very, very small sampling of different forms of dementia. Think of it this way. I often say we've always, all of us have heard of cancer, unfortunately, right? So cancer is a very general term. I'm sure you'd agree. But when you think about, are there types or forms of it? Absolutely. There is breast cancer. There is prostate cancer. There is all different types. So again, dementia is the general term like cancer, and the specific type would be Alzheimer's, okay? And we'll talk a little bit about diagnoses, so I think I'll keep that note for the future. All right, quick recap. So we know that dementia is that general term for a collection of symptoms. And again, by definition, this is important to add, these symptoms are severe enough to interfere with daily life. In other words, an individual's family would notice that there was something going on that did not seem like that person, okay? Alzheimer's is the most common cause or form of dementia. It accounts, by the way, for anywhere between 60 to 80% of the cases of dementia out there. And we know too, it's not a normal part of aging. It is a progressive brain disease. Any questions so far before we take a look at the brain, inside the brain? So far, so good?
Yeah, Maddie had a question in the chat.
Sure.
Where she said, how can someone prevent developing Alzheimer's?
How can someone keep from developing it? Is that the question?
Yeah.
All right, well, that would be, here's what we know at this point. And we often say so many of that question alone, really, we have our own, or it's a separate education program for. It's called Healthy Living for Your Brain and Body. I will say quickly, scientists and researchers are really looking continually, and have been for some time, as to how we can best, or even, in some greater fashion, answer that question. What we currently know is that, moderate exercise, social stimulation, that means getting out and about with people as we age, keeping our brains active. Also, what am I missing? Mental stimulation, the social engagement, exercise, and also diet. Mediterranean diet is recommended. I am glad to send you by follow-up. Devin, you can remind me if anyone would like. We have a little infographic called 10 Ways to Love Your Brain, and it's got each of those spelled out on there. That's what we currently know, but again, lots of research is ongoing, and the association is behind that. So right now, what we know is how we can reduce our risk. We cannot yet say the word prevent, unfortunately, but with time, we certainly hope we can. Let's hear from another expert here about inside the brain.
More than 100 years ago, Dr. Alice Alzheimer's described specific changes in the brain, what we call the formation of plaques and tangles. Now, Alzheimer's is a progressive brain disease that's marked by these key changes and is thought to impact memory, thinking, and behavior. The brain has three main parts: the cerebrum, the cerebellum, and the brainstem. Each one plays a role in how the body functions. The cerebrum fills up most of your skull. It is part of the brain most involved in remembering, problem solving, thinking, and even feelings. There are about 100 billion nerve cells or neurons throughout the brain that transmit messages in order for us to create memories, feelings, and thoughts. Alzheimer's disease causes nerve cells to die, which leads to the brain tissue loss, or what we call shrinkage, and causes loss of function and communication between cells. These changes can cause the symptoms of Alzheimer's disease, such as memory loss, problems with thinking, planning, behavioral issues, and even at the end stages, problems with swallowing.
All right, just a little glimpse into what's going on inside the brain. We'll skip the recap here in the interest of time. Did anybody, I will ask you, did anybody know or have an idea where the name came from? It is indeed from the German doctor who first discovered it or wrote about it, published on it. Yeah, any other questions on that segment before we go on to risk factors?
We have more questions, but we can wait until the end.
Okay.
To answer those, yeah.
Oh, okay, you sure? All right. We will keep it going. Risk factors here, all right? Take a look, and I think we have a little question here first. Yes, we do. We got to cover those. There's a little bit of it's a little slow, and it's flipping from screen to screen. This is the one I already gave you the answer to, but what greatest known risk factor for Alzheimer's disease? And I will tell you that all three are risk factors. Which is the greatest?
Age.
Age, absolutely. We know it's not a part of normal aging, but age is indeed the greatest risk factor for the disease. After age 65, believe it or not, the risk of Alzheimer's doubles every 5 years. You might read that again. Doubles every 5 years after the age 65, right? 32% of people age 85 and older, in fact, have Alzheimer's. And we'll begin exploring which people and women, I'm sorry to say, we are at greater risk for reasons, some of which scientists are just even beginning to understand. So let's hear a little bit more, I think, next year.
Alzheimer's disease is marked by specific brain changes that result in the clinical changes in individual experiences. That is, changes in memory, thinking, or reasoning. And ultimately, Alzheimer's is fatal. The exact cause for these changes is unknown, but there are some hints as to what may contribute to an individual's risk. Age is the greatest known risk factor for Alzheimer's, and when we look at populations of people, we see an increased risk over the age of 65. However, Alzheimer's is not normal aging. Family history is also a known risk factor. Research has shown that those who have a parent or a sibling with Alzheimer's are more likely to develop the disease, and that risk increases if more than one family member has Alzheimer's. When we talk about the genes involved in Alzheimer's, there are two categories that could potentially be involved: risk genes and deterministic genes. Risk genes increases an individual's risk for developing the disease, but does not guarantee that they will develop Alzheimer's. Deterministic genes, which are rare for Alzheimer's, guarantee that the person will develop the disease.
All right, so did you understand that? Any questions about risk genes versus deterministic genes? Yeah, please, go ahead, sure.
Say someone fell, does that fall into like a risk gene?
I will say this, that's a great question, first of all, thank you for asking it. Protecting one's head, certainly against, falls if one's bicycling, issues with stairs, stairwells that aren't lit well, things like that. Absolutely, brain damage can play a role. Absolutely can. So that is, it can be a factor certainly, but age is still a greater factor by far. But again, I think that those 10 ways to love your brain might be really, really insightful for you guys. So if Devin's open to it, I'll follow up perhaps tomorrow and send it along to you guys. And you can take a look at that and feel free to copy it and share it with others. But great question. Excuse me, yeah, great question. So I will also say this because people often get concerned here. Risk genes, if there are tests today that we can get for both of these types of genes. We always advise at the association, if you want to do that, speak first with what's called a genetic counselor first, or call our helpline. It's available 24/7 just for any questions you have even about the disease, okay? But really, it's important to know what you're getting into before you do it and to begin to think ahead and work with someone to understand the process, right? But risk genes would simply mean you're at greater risk to develop it. It is not a determination that you are going to get it. So it's important to keep that in mind. If someone is found to have that deterministic gene, which means you will get it, that is not very common at all, okay? Not very common. So again, a lot of people say, oh, I don't want to get tested, but consider this. Really important to be aware of the diagnosis, to know what signs to look for. We also have a program on that topic because there is also a long, long list of conditions, hypothyroidism. Mixed medications can affect people's memory sometimes, and it would be an awful shame if that was a cause instead and someone did not go to their doctor and know that it was treatable or manageable. So if you have any concern, it is important to get a diagnosis to understand what's going on. This also allows individuals to be able to, they have longer to speak into their future, a greater opportunity to remain independent. So we at the association are very, feel very strongly about getting that diagnosis as soon as possible. A couple of populations that are important to mention. We understand from science that Hispanics are at a greater risk of developing Alzheimer's and other dementias. We also understand that African Americans are at a greater risk of developing the disease as whites. And almost 2/3 we know of Americans, I often say, ladies, listen up, right, with Alzheimer's are women. Why the Hispanics? Well, certain treatments, I should say, how certain people groups have been or feel they have been treated or have been treated really as they have maybe been hesitant to seek a diagnosis can play a role certainly too. And that I'm glad to say is an important part of our facts and figures this particular year is focusing on discrimination and things of that nature playing a role. But we also understand that these particular populations have higher vascular ailments, if you will. And what we know that heart health equals brain health. We understand that if individuals have a lot of strokes or high cholesterol, fat around their heart, that is going to increase the likelihood that that individual would develop Alzheimer's later in life. Heart health is equal to brain health, so that's part of it too. But I just want to leave you with the assurance that we as researchers are looking into each of these areas, and it is so critically important, and trying to encourage also other researchers around the world through our annual international conference each summer to do the same. Okay. All right, and at the interest of time here, I'll give you an introduction to, I'm not gonna, I think, share all of these details, but I will add here too that as you see on the screen, does everyone living with Alzheimer's experience the same early symptoms? The answer is no, and we have a saying at the association that is, you've seen one case of Alzheimer's, you've seen one case of Alzheimer's. It can look very different from person to person. One individual we might notice has we might notice at the very beginning is having some trouble remembering vocabulary, where another is having trouble maybe, brushing his or her teeth, kind of with some of the daily tasks. So the onset can look very different, but again, understanding what signs to look for and knowing what to do if you have such concerns are incredibly important. We'll listen further here.
Alzheimer's affects everyone differently. As a result, it's difficult to place a person in a specific stage of the disease. However, there are 3 general stages that are commonly referred to as early, middle, and late stage Alzheimer's. In a medical context, you may hear these stages referred to as mild, moderate, and severe. In the early stage of Alzheimer's, an individual may be able to function independently. However, they may start noticing more frequent memory lapses. Friends and family may also begin to notice difficulties in the person, and a healthcare provider may be able to detect problems in memory or concentration by conducting a detailed medical interview. Middle stage Alzheimer's is typically the longest stage and can last for many years. Damage to the brain cells can make it difficult to express thoughts and perform routine tasks, and this can lead to increased feelings of frustration and anger. In the final stage of the disease, an individual loses the ability to hold a conversation, control their movements, or respond to the environment around them. Cognitive skills, that is, their memory, thinking, and reasoning skills, continue to decline, and this can lead to personality changes and need for round-the-clock care.
And I'll close with this really. I think a lot of people ask too, well, how long does somebody have Alzheimer's? Perhaps that was a question that you may have had. And I've heard it said, 4 to 7 years after diagnosis. But then the better question becomes, well, when was the person diagnosed? If they were diagnosed in middle stage, again, that would vary per person. So really anywhere between 5 years and 20 years. And then I often like to say either end of the spectrum can be relatively uncommon. But recently, I've heard of 2 or 3 people who have lived 21 or so years with the disease. And so it can be long and it can be brief. Again, you've seen one case of Alzheimer's, you've seen one case of Alzheimer's. Okay. And I think in the interest of time, so I think now's a good place to pause. Maybe we don't have time to go through all the FDA approved treatments for symptoms, but I will simply tell you that up to this point in time, really, the medications or the treatments that we have had available really have not at all touched the underlying disease, the Alzheimer's itself. They've been really treatments for symptoms, trouble sleeping, trouble with, motor skills or things of that nature. But now again, even this summer, the FDA approved a brand new drug called aducanumab, or its brand name is Aduhelm, that is really the first of its kind to show some promise. I'll leave it there because it's incredibly complicated. But all that to say, it's good news. And as we continue to understand more about our lifestyles and how that can help reduce risk, we are beginning to make some progress, but we love your help in getting there. And I'll go ahead, I think, and maybe I'll switch over so that I can add a few notes to the chat box to our 800 line. Would that be okay, Devin, if we pause here for questions?
Please, yeah, absolutely.
All right,
And then also the
I'll
follow-up
stop
that you
sharing.
wanted to send as well to everybody.
Okay.
Absolutely, you can either send that to me and I can send it out to everybody, or
Okay. Here is too, if you see this quickly, our latest facts and figures. And up here is what I was referring to, these topics, discrimination. Can you see that okay, you guys?
Yeah.
It's sometimes a barrier to Alzheimer's and dementia care. These populations, certain populations report discrimination when seeking health care, And so that can also play a role in not getting a diagnosis, not getting the care perhaps that one is needing. And so that can also affect the statistics as we're seeing them, right? But here you see more than 6 million people in this particular year. Okay, so I will be quiet now and go ahead and I'll stop sharing and questions. Yeah, what was the one that we have in the chat box?
So this one is from Ed. Ed asks, how much of the development of Alzheimer's is attributed to genetics?
I think I couldn't quite hear the end. I'm sorry, how much?
So how much of the development of Alzheimer's is attributed to genetics?
How much of Alzheimer's is attributed to genetics? I don't have a percentage for you or whatnot. As we heard, I think in one of the videos mentioned, it certainly plays a role. For example, if if an individual has, let's say, one parent who has the disease, it is going to increase one's risk. Again, don't have a percentage for that, but if I do know that if there are 2 parents involved and even more family members, that is going to increase it further. For specifics and percents and such, I'd have to look it up, honestly. I don't want to tell you something wrong, but that's what I do know. So.
Perfect. And Joe
yeah.
had a question to piggyback off of that. What is the relationship between telomeres and Alzheimer's?
And telomeres is understood as?
Let's see. I'm actually not too familiar. Joe, did you want to explain a little bit more? I'm not too familiar with it myself.
What was that? I'm having trouble hearing for some reason. Sorry.
Telomeres are the part of the DNA that's at the end of the chromosomes. And so I was asking because
There you
there's,
are.
a lot of recent research about the degradation of those in relation to like dementia and Alzheimer's.
You know what we're going to do here, because I am not a neuroscientist or an MD. If there's an opportunity to do this again, which I would love, Rojan Javaheri is, we actually have two young college students, I will say. One's pursuing her master's currently. She studies neuroscience and does Alzheimer's research, and I'd love for her to tackle that question. I would, but I cannot provide you an answer. I'm not knowledgeable enough on the topic. But
Yeah, thank you.
if that's a deal, I'd love to hook you guys up with her. Devin, we'll talk about that.
Definitely. No, I
So-
love that. That'd be great.
Yeah. So no, a lot
And I
of
think-
science knowledge. That's
That's
not
all right. Me neither. So
I do see the stroke question. Is that the next
Yes,
where you're
which-
going?
Yeah, but I believe you sort of answered it already, but if you wanted to add anything else.
I did, but the answer to that is definitely yes. Because, and also sleep apnea, I'll add in there, because sleep apnea, essentially, I know it's different than stroke, obviously, but anything really where there is, the brain is being deprived of whether it's oxygen by sleep apnea or whether it's blood flow, as we have happened during vascular damage. So absolutely is a yes. That's a yes. Mhm. Right.
So that's all the questions we had in the chat. Does anyone else have any questions for Jody here before we go ahead and stop the meeting?
Yeah, can I ask one more?
Oh,
Sure.
please, yeah.
Putting our helpline number up for everybody if you want to. You share it. Yeah. Sure.
In terms of lifestyle changes to reduce the risk of developing Alzheimer's, what would you say is probably the most significant change that someone could probably make in their life to reduce the risk? Most beneficial one, I guess.
Yeah, hard to say. And I'm trying to think of which, okay, so the 4 areas we talked about, we've got, exercise, nutrition, social engagement, and mental stimulation. We do know that the least research has been done so far on social engagement. Probably you guys have probably all heard, your parents, probably grandparents have heard, oh, do crossword puzzles and such, right? Anybody heard that, right? And that there is a great amount of truth in that. And that's about keeping your brains a muscle and keeping it working, right? Perhaps the greatest study is being done, probably I would say, with regard to exercise currently. And there's a lot more information. If you go to our website, guys, and I'll go ahead and put down here, it's just alz.org. And actually in the search bar, we have a huge website. So the easiest way to find information is to use the search bar, honestly. And if you type in, the US Pointer Study, it is currently in the process right now. It is really the first large-scale study of its kind to look at lifestyle changes and what we're beginning to see. There was the finger study that was done in Finland, I think it was 2014. It was really a much smaller scale study to look at those 4 areas that I mentioned. I will say, Ed, right, Ed, that what we do know is that doing some of all of those areas together is going to maximize one's benefit too, okay? So to stay socially engaged, connected with people, keep your brain working, and again, that 10 ways to love your brain, I think will be a helpful tool for you too. So lots more. I would say it's like the history of the world in 20 minutes, 25 minutes, right? So a little hard.
Doing a great job. That's okay.
Yeah.
Do you think that you've seen do you think that you've seen a reduction of Alzheimer's lately? Like, even though the study says what they say, I feel like I've noticed a lot more older people taking care of themselves, like at a certain age. So do you think that like maybe like in the next 10 years, we might not see as much dementia?
It is sadly only to increase, is what is said by pretty much every expert, and that is incredibly sad. But I think what that points to, I think you're absolutely right in the sense that do we know more about, again, those healthy lifestyles? Absolutely. So, and we know of a few more things that really can help reduce risk, but we also understand that's not the whole package, right? Again, there's so much that scientists are still seeking to understand about what really is the initial cause or what causes the onset of Alzheimer's disease itself. So sadly, no, but I think, are we also getting more knowledgeable at the same time? I think absolutely. But we do need a lot more. We lag really, really far behind, let's say, cancer. We have a lot of today because of a lot of funding and a lot of clinical studies ongoing. We've had a lot of progress with AIDS. When we look at AIDS way back when, you guys are young, but I remember when it first started, it was terrifying. And so they really are looking to treatments like those. I would say AIDS to be kind of a combination if you think of lifestyle and also medication, you know? So there could be something of that nature too to come for us with Alzheimer's, but we hope we'll get there. We're a step at a time, but we hope you'll join us too. If I can do anything to inspire. We're also always looking for volunteers, right, Devin? So thanks for your interest. So yeah, there's so much more, but would love to let Rojan connect with you guys. She would, I think, would be inspiring. So
Absolutely.
there's an opportunity. Thank you.
So I think since it's 5:05, sort of end it there. If you guys had any more questions that you wanted to ask Jody
Oh.
here, you guys can please go ahead and leave them in the chat, and I can actually email them over to her if you'd like, or you can.
There's my email too, if you ever
As I
want to
said,
email me.
there you go. I was just about to say, or
Yeah.
you could probably email her yourself. I love it. Thank you, Jody.
Yes, of course.
And thank you so much for the information and the incredible presentation. I'm
Of course,
sure
thank you.
but everyone else here feels the same way, where it was extremely informative, big eye opener. And
Yeah.
I'm excited to be working with you in the future as well to get some other people in here, and also yourself. Again, that'd be awesome. But yeah, so thank you from everyone here again. And then guys.
And you
I'll
guys
go-
meet, is it every 2 weeks? Is that correct, Devin?
Correct. Yeah. So it's the first and third Monday of every month.
Oh, sorry.
Or,
Okay.
sorry, not Monday. Tuesday. First and third
Gotcha.
Tuesday. I always
Right,
get my dates
gotcha.
mixed up.
Okay.
So
That's
yeah.
okay.
So I'm going to go ahead
Wonderful.
and thank you again, and I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here.
My pleasure. Thank you, guys. Yeah.
Yeah, and just so you guys know, we did the Alzheimer's walk this past Saturday. 3
Yes.
days ago. That was
did.
incredible. It was a lot of fun. We had a lot of people show up from our side, which is really cool. So the last two things I wanted to just touch on, we have our next meeting. It's going to be October 19th. So mark your calendars, everyone, for that. And then we also have our next meditation Monday, which will be the 18th, which we had the first one yesterday. It went fantastic. We might even make it weekly and speak to the advisors. Speak to the advisors about that. So that next one will be on October 18th. So 18th and 19th, 2 weeks from now. I'm going to go ahead and adjourn this meeting here at 5:07. And that is it.
Keep up the
everyone.
great work, you guys. Keep up the great work too.
Thanks, show you as
Thank-
well.
Likewise.
Cool. Thank you, everyone. You were free to go if you want to hang around and ask them a question or two. You can be here. If not, you guys are all free to go. Thank you so much for coming today. It was awesome to see everyone's face.
Thanks
you,
so
Ed,
much. Bye, guys.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
Hey, Jody, did you make sure? Oh, should I see? That's all right. Thank you. And Ed,